May the words of my mouth and the thoughts of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our salvation. Fire is our most potent symbol. When someone dies, we light a flame. We light one again when someone is born. When Christmas comes, the church is awash with a sea of candles. At Easter, we light a fire. At Pentecost, we light one again. And when our hearts are filled to bursting and we do not have the words to form a prayer, we light a candle trusting that the flame will express the inexpressible and will give voice to all that is unsaid. This week, Minneapolis has been on fire. And this fire too gives voice, if not to the unsaid, then certainly to the unheard longings of many hearts. The fires in Minneapolis express the anger of a community which has witnessed their voice being fatally ignored. When a man pleads for his life for a full 5 minutes and the boot is not raised from his throat until he has been silent for a further 3, something louder is required to give voice to his plight. Our diocesan motto is Hearts on Fire, and for many years I've celebrated Pentecost with you, and I have experienced a heart on fire with love and hearts on fire with hope. But this year my heart is on fire with anger. And I would like to share with you a story, not the story of George Floyd and the terrible injustice done to him and his people, but to another middle-aged black man, a man I will be burying next week, a man who was born in the same year as me and was raised in the same little patch of South London that I was. He did not die dramatically and publicly like George Floyd, yet I feel his voice was also never heard. The funeral directors could tell me nothing about him. His uncle could tell me nothing about him. And when I tried, I could not contact his mother. She had no mobile, she had no landline, and when I knocked on the door, she did not answer. So I spoke to some neighbours and they said they thought she might belong to another church. So I spoke to the minister who said he could not tell me much about the family. They had suffered with mental illness, they were hard to contact, and we discussed what I should do, and maybe I should just turn up to the funeral and read the prayers from the book as I would with someone who had died unknown. And I don't know why it was that I tried again. I certainly didn't want to. I was irritable and bad-tempered about it, but maybe it was stubbornness, maybe professional pride, maybe it was the fact that he was born on the same year as me and raised in the same part of London that I was. But anyway, I went again and then again to knock on the door of the house that he'd shared with his mother all his life. And finally, when she opened the door, I couldn't get her to speak. And the first time she sent me away, but finally she told me he had been mentally ill. He was a quiet soul. He loved music. He liked to drink and a smoke and a fry-up. And she told me of her own life and how hard it was for her to come to London in the 60s and of the racism she experienced every day that made her feel like she was less than other people around her. And she told me how isolated she felt and how the area had changed so much in her lifetime, and now there was no one left on the street from back in the day, and they knew people were different and they minded their own business. Both she and her home were run down. Her family had received no support, and she had cared for her son from birth to death. He was not murdered by a policeman for being poor and black, but his life and death are also full of injustice. He lived and died below the radar. His experiences were never valued. His voice was never heard. At Pentecost, the disciples, also a persecuted minority, were accused of being drunken fools, and their voices were also dismissed. And Peter stood And he spoke the words of the prophet Joel. In those days, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your young will have visions, your old will dream dreams, your sons and your daughters, even the enslaved, will prophesy. God speaks through those who are on the margins, those whose voices are often unheard and whose lived experience is frequently overlooked. This Pentecost, we ponder all that the pandemic is revealing to us. We are aware that the voices of many have not been heard. The black men and women who are more likely to have low-paid jobs, more likely to live in overcrowded communities, more likely to be overlooked, are also more likely to die. The very old, the very young, the poor, those who struggle, they are the ones who will dream dreams, who will have visions of a different future, who will prophesy to us, speaking words we may not want to hear, but ones we need to listen to. Before I left the doorstep of the mother whose son I will bury next week, I asked her what had kept her going all these years, and she told me as a child she'd been taught by heart the Lord's Prayer and the 23rd Psalm and many spiritual songs, and then completely unexpectedly, in the middle of the afternoon on her doorstep, she suddenly opened her mouth and sang loudly and passionately, "O Lord my God and Father, oft I stray, yet still to you I pray, though life is hard and dark my way, thy will be done." And it broke my heart. It filled my heart with such sorrow which then turned to anger and since has grown into a deep longing for us to be a community that listens to the voices of all upon whom God pours his Spirit. The young, the old, the poor, the oppressed. And when we have listened, and when we have heard, and when our hearts have been set ablaze, then and only then will the Spirit of the Lord fall on us and anoint us. Anoint us for this purpose, to bring good news to the poor, to open the eyes of the blind, to proclaim the release of the captives, the recovery of sight to the blind, and to let the oppressed go free.